what I hear beauty bosses tell me all the time is like, well, I'm just a small business. Like, I'm just starting. Like, I don't really need a trademark right now.
Yeah.
And that really couldn't be further from the truth, just because what you just mentioned, like you start a business and it may start in your a house. It may start in your garage. It may start in like, something very small. And you're thinking like, oh, well, I'm just kind of doing this on the side. But once you put your name out there, your name continues to grow. Word of mouth continues to grow. They're like, oh, I get my eyelashes done at Luscious Lashes. And then you get like kind of stuck, so you can say, with that name that you started, right? And it just keeps building momentum until, like you said, you're opening up a salon, you're hiring employees, you have your name on the outside of your building, and you're like scaling, you're going full force from your small little baby business. And then next thing you know, you get hit with a cease and desist. And they're like, hey, that sign outside of your door, I want it down in 7 days. Like this whole business, I want the name changed in 7 days.
Welcome to Glow Up Boss, the business school for beauty entrepreneurs. Having trained over 8,000 women to build and run profitable beauty businesses, I'm here to share knowledge and skills to put you on the fast track to grow your business and glow up your life. I'm your host, Veronique Monroe. With 20 years experience as a product developer, celebrity spray tan artist, and founder of multiple sunless tanning companies, I've launched products and methods that have become today's industry standard. This podcast is where you will learn what you need to build your business from the ground up. You'll hear from industry experts on how to build a thriving customer base, grow revenue, buy back your time, and create the freedom to live life on your terms. It's time to discover the boss within you. Get ready to glow up. Okay, let me paint a picture for you. A new spray tan artist or a new hairdresser or a new lash technician is so passionate about what she's doing. She takes a space in a salon suite or inside of an existing hairdressing salon, and she's making much more money and achieving much more success than she could possibly have imagined. Suddenly, out of the blue, she gets a cease and desist order from someone from another state saying they own the trademark on the name that she's been using. I can't tell you how many situations I've seen and heard like this, the tears, the money, the stress, the anxiety. Welcome to the Glow Up Boss, your beauty business podcast, bringing you today a trademarking expert. And this woman is not just an expert in trademarking, but she actually comes from the beauty industry. I am so delighted to introduce you today to Reonna Green. Reonna, thank you so much for joining me today on Glow Up Boss.
No problem. I'm so excited to be here talking about trademarks, beauty business, all of the things.
So you have a really amazing and interesting background. You used to be a hairdresser and now you're an attorney.
Yeah. I was in beauty school all throughout college. Well, I did beauty school and then I used my beauty license all throughout college, all throughout law school. So I was behind the chair for at least 8 years. And so I've been in all of these beauty bosses' shoes. Like I remember what I wasn't doing legally that I should have been doing legally. But it's kind of one of those things, you don't know what you don't know. And so when I started my business that was dedicated to beauty professionals in the business space, I really wanted to educate beauty professionals on what to do from a place of like love and not from a place of like this big mahogany table and a stuffy tie and suit. I actually am in a suit today, but that's only because I had court this morning. Otherwise, you can find me with my big hoops, my hair in a bun, jeans, a t-shirt, but really just to kind of be like your legal beauty bestie that can help you.
I love that. It's amazing because it's really amazing when you look at this. You've got these women that just love the beauty industry. They love providing these incredible services and developing relationships with their clients, but they don't understand what the implications are if they choose a name, don't search the trademark, become successful in business, and then one day out of the blue, when they're least expecting it, they find out they're infringing on someone's mark and they're going to have to start all over and lose all the equity of the brand that they built. Have you seen this situation happen a lot of times in your years of business?
It happens way more than you would think, or than a person would think, because it's one of those things. What I hear beauty bosses tell me all the time is like, well, I'm just a small business. Like, I'm just starting. Like, I don't really need a trademark right now.
Yeah.
And that really couldn't be further from the truth. Just because what you just mentioned, like, you start a business and it may start in your a house. It may start in your garage. It may start in something very small, and you're thinking like, oh, well, I'm just kind of doing this on the side. But once you put your name out there, your name continues to grow. Word of mouth continues to grow. They're like, oh, I get my eyelashes done at Luscious Lashes. And then you get kind of stuck, so you can say, with that name that you started, right? And it just keeps building momentum until, like you said, you're opening up a salon, you're hiring employees, you have your name on the outside of your building. And you're scaling, you're going full force from your small little baby business. And then next thing you know, you get hit with a cease and desist. And they're like, hey, that sign outside of your door, I want it down in 7 days. Like, this whole business, I want the name changed in 7 days. And then you've got those tiers that you mentioned earlier. I have people come in my office all the time crying, and they're like, but this beauty business is in New York and I'm in California. And what do they care about me for? And, it's because, well, they own that name and they care because they have a reputation to uphold, and they put in the money and invested in their business, and they don't want anything bad to happen to that name, or any bad press or any bad reviews, all kinds of things. But it happens way more than you would imagine.
Well, trust me, I know.
Yeah.
I see it. I hear it every single day with just the businesses that I work with, but also in all of the Facebook groups, people asking, do I need to have a trademark, or, mentioning a situation where somebody comes to them and says you can't use that name. But even for myself, I have to tell you, for the last maybe 12 years, the largest line item on my legal bill is protecting my Glow on the Go trademark. I cannot tell you how much aggravation having a name like Glow on the Go has caused me through the years.
Yeah.
Because it's not enough to just register the trademark, but you've got to defend it as well. And that gets really costly. Even when people know they're infringing, they'll literally continue to infringe and think they'll get away from it unless they're a big player. I won't mention the name, but I actually had a very large pharmaceutical company, one of the largest, infringing on the Glow on the Go name. And my attorney sent them a cease and desist order. And within 20 minutes of getting the cease and desist, they're already taking steps to remove that product from the shelf because they knew.
No, they know that it's going to be a costly, expense if you guys take it further, because that's another thing I think people don't think about as far as trademarks go. You mentioned two really good points. Once you own the name, you have to actually defend it, meaning you have to enforce it against people who are copying, who are infringing on your mark. And that's kind of one of the big things. And then one of the second things is, this big pharmaceutical company you mentioned, depending on what the terms of a cease and desist are and how long they've been infringing, trademarks are also valuable assets, meaning you can be entitled to compensation if someone is infringing on your trademark and you send them a cease and desist and they continue to do it. Well, then you can be like, well, how many units of this product have you sold? Okay, let's say they sold 10,000. How much is each bottle worth? Let's say it's worth, $30. Now we're looking at, what's the math on that? $300,000. So you have $300,000 in potential damages that this company has made off of infringing on your trademark. And so then it becomes, what's it going to cost to make this go away? And if you are the trademark owner, this can be very beneficial to you. You're enforcing your trademark. You could be entitled to compensation. But if you are the infringer, so if you are that copycat, then this can be really expensive, because now you have to pull off all that product that you mentioned. You have to rebrand. You have to decide and defend, negotiate what am I going to have to pay this person that I was like infringing on? Sometimes you get nice people and they're just like, I want you to stop using it. Sometimes it's like, hey, you made a lot of money off of my name and I'm entitled to compensation. So those are two things that people don't often think about when it comes to trademarks.
100%. I couldn't agree with you more. Rihanna, as you were talking, it just occurred to me from the legal standpoint, I kind of want to back up a little bit off the trademark. We'll come back to this in just a second. So I'm kind of going into the mind of a brick and mortar service provider. So, like I'd mentioned before, a spray tan artist, a hairdresser, an esthetician, a lash artist, someone who does it from home or their garage or goes into a physical space. There are so many different legal things that they need to look at, whether it's a contract with the space that they're going into, whether it's, if they're trainers as well, because a lot of these service providers also become trainers. They have like train the trainer programs. So having an agreement like that, brand ambassadors now with all the social media, people are, to get their name out there, oftentimes they bring on board brand ambassadors and they need to have agreements in place for that. Employee agreements, in some states, non-compete agreements. There are just so many different agreements. Obviously there's, choosing your name, and that's a whole other thing. Choosing, your name and what sort of entity you're going to be. Are you going to be an LLC? Or are you going to be a sole proprietorship, an S Corp? There are just so many different areas that you really need to have an attorney for. And I'm so happy that you come from the beauty industry and you can look at all the different angles of this where, you might get another IP attorney who may not be familiar with the beauty space, that doesn't understand like all these different areas. It could be product, it could be consumer products. A lot of people are white labeling products right now, looking at international protection of a name if you're doing e-commerce. So I just wanted to throw all of this into the soup of this podcast today, because it isn't just about trademarking. There are just so many different areas, legal areas that we really need to pay attention to. And I do want to have like a brief conversation about that. And then I want to dive a little bit deeper into the trademarking side, because I think it's great. And then I'm going to invite you back for another podcast, because there's so much for us to talk about on this subject.
There is so much. I want to mention, to piggyback off what you said, a new brick and mortar business that is just starting. I always say there's about 5 things that you need to do, and you've touched on almost all of them, I think, except for one. But the first one would be like, decide what your business entity is going to be. Like you said, are you going to be a sole proprietor, an LLC? Are you going to do a corporation? Like, what exactly is it that you're going to be doing? Then once you have that established, you need to get your contracts in place. So you mentioned quite a few of them. And those are the same ones that I typically recommend people do. You need an employee contract if you're going to have employees. You need a training contract if you're going to have, trainings. You also need model releases. If you are going to be recording people to then use their face and the lashes that you did or the spray tan that you did for advertising, you need a model release. If you're going to repost anything that gets slid into your DMs, if someone's like, oh my gosh, love my spray tan, best one I've ever had, et cetera, you need to have a testimonial release for that. And then, the list kind of goes on and on as it relates to contracts, just depending on what you're doing. But contracts would be number 2. Number 3, you have to get your business bank account set up. So that's a main thing, because if you get your protection of your LLC, but you keep depositing all the business money into your personal account, you could potentially lose the protection of that LLC or that corporation. So that's huge. Number 4, I would say, is to make sure that you get business insurance, because that's going to help you in cases of slip and falls, in cases of eye infections, or any type of injury that you're doing as a result of your services. And people sometimes think, well, what kind of injuries can get, is someone really going to get? Well, sometimes people have allergic reactions to bleach. If you're doing hair, glue, if you're doing eyelashes, skin products, if you're doing like esthetician services, there's lots of things that can happen. So your business insurance is a great thing. And then number 5, trademark. So, we talked about that. And those are not necessarily in order, but those are the top 5 things I would say that every brick and mortar, or just even an e-commerce business needs to do.
Totally. As you're talking, and I know all of this, even for my own business, we make sunless tanning products and skincare products and train businesses on how to launch, spray tanning businesses or beauty-based businesses. And what I will say to you is, oh my goodness, probably the number one thing I hear when I'm mentoring my clients is, where am I going to come up with the money for all of this? I know I need all of this. How can I afford to do this? How do I prioritize this? Yes, I know I need insurance. Yes, I know I need a trademark. Yes, I know I need all these contracts. How would you recommend for them to prioritize and allocate funds to do all of these?
So I would say the first thing is, there are some things and that you can do by yourself, like a DIY. And I will give you an example of one or two that are like, hey, you could do this yourself. Filing for a one-person LLC, and that's the caveat, not a partnership, not like two or more people, but just one person. Filing for an LLC, the instructions online are pretty easy. You can do it on your Secretary of State's website. You do need to get like an operating agreement, an operating contract in play. So, we're talking about contracts, but the actual initial filing of the LLC, if you're just one person, you can do by yourself. So that can kind of cut costs there. Some insurance is better than no insurance. So I know that some of the beauty organizations have insurance that you can get for like $200 a year. And that's going to give you some protection. That's better than no protection. So you can kind of cut a little bit of costs there. Trademarks. Lots of attorneys will offer payment plans for that. And so you can look into that. I would say trademarks are not the area that you want to cut corners or DIY, just because they're very nuanced and you want to make sure you get the descriptions for your categories really airtight. You want to make sure that you're not spending the money to file and then only for it to get denied. So I would say having a trademark attorney in your corner for that is really important. I offer DIY plug and play contract templates that are not state specific, but there are areas where you will put in like the laws of California or the laws of Georgia apply. The jurisdiction, if a lawsuit is filed, will be California or Georgia. You plug in whatever your state is. And lots of contracts, for the most part, are going to be the same principles across all the states. Except, of course, like your non-competes or something like that, which are pretty state specific. But something like that, you can get all of the contracts that we've talked about in my shop for $1,249. So that can give you almost everything that you need, at a fraction of the cost. If you are going to go private route, it can get expensive, but contracts are one of the things that are kind of going to be the basis of your foundation for your business. So that should be pretty high up on your docket of to-dos.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree. Glow Up Boss podcast is brought to you today by Infinity Sun. Are you an entrepreneur thinking that you'd like to start a new business that's fun, that doesn't cost a lot of money to start up, that you could do in the evenings and weekends and earn lots and lots of money? Starting a spray tanning business definitely checks off all those boxes. With state-of-the-art plug-and-spray proprietary spray tanning systems that require only one solution, you can literally choose 30 different levels of spray on the spray tanning system itself. Infinity Sun offers sunless tanning solutions that combine high-end skincare together with sunless tanning technology to not only create the most flawless looking tans, but also to improve the condition of the skin. So if you were to get a new client, like say I were to say, okay, I have a client for you and I'm sending her to you today. She's just starting her business and she has a budget of $5,000 for legal. How would you allocate that budget? She has a name. She does spray tanning and she's going into a room inside of a salon. She's just starting out. What would you recommend for her?
I would recommend that she file an LLC by herself. So that's going to cut the cost of that. So that's going to be probably about like $300 to, get her LLC set up. So now we're down to about $5,700, right? Then I would say, let's go ahead and do a trademark because let's not lose all that goodwill, like you mentioned earlier, building a brand that you later have to rebrand. So that's going to cut us down about $2,500. So now we've got $2,500 give or take, to play with. 2,200 is what we're down to. And I would say with the remaining 2,200, I would purchase either templates from my shop or templates from somewhere that's going to give you another lawyer that drafts templates, or myself that's going to give you your core contracts, your employment contract if you have employees. Everybody needs to be using a client services agreement. Everyone has policies. Everyone in our industry has policies, whether they're posting them on Instagram, putting them on their website, or just texting to them. Everyone has policies. Those need to be in a legal contract. And so I would say, getting your foundational contracts template-based, and then working with an attorney on an hourly basis to tighten them up and make sure that they are perfect for your business. And that will probably take you through the rest of it. There'll probably be a little bit left over to purchase one of those beauty-based insurances that we've talked about. And that is what I would do to kind of get a really good, solid legal foundation in play right at the start.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. I love that. I think that's really useful information. Now, I just want to be clear. You did the bar in California and in Georgia. Is that correct?
That's right. Yep.
So you can offer legal advice. So if I were to send clients to you from, I have clients all over the country or all over the world, but specific to the US, all over the country, could they buy your templates and then see an attorney in their own state to modify them?
Yes. So they could buy the templates and then they could take it to an attorney for modifications. That is usually the more cost-effective route, and I'm going to tell you why. Because if you come to an attorney and you're like, hey, I want you to draft from scratch, like open a blank document and draft this thing, you're probably going to be looking at $1,500 on the low end, but probably on average about $2,500 per custom contract. If you need an employment one and you need a client services one and you need a training one, you can see how that racks up really fast. We're at $7,500 right there. But if you've already purchased them and you're like, hey, can you review this on an hourly basis? It might take them 3 or 4 hours to review it, make some edits, whatever. And then you're looking at maybe $350 an hour times 3, plus the cost of whatever the template was. Mine usually range around $300. So you're looking at least half of the cost by doing it that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's go back to trademarking and the process. So what a typical example of a customer might be for me is somebody who buys a spray tanning machine, who goes through the training and starts doing spray tanning services. So she'll have to have a name for her service-based business. And if everything goes well, we work together, she grows, she becomes a 6-figure business, she gets lots of customers, she may expand, she may take another space, then she wants to have a product line. So she's trademarked the name for her service-based business, and now she wants to launch a product line. This is a very typical example of what my clients are like. Would you recommend for them going through the trademark process to obtain the trademark for service and for product, or would you have them do it in stages?
So it depends. My question usually with any new client is, how fast do you see a product line coming into play? Because I'm going to tell you right now, on average, it's taking about 14 to 16 months on average to get through the trademark process. So if you are like, hey, I'm just now starting this sprayless tanning service, I think in about 18 months, I'm going to launch a product line, launch my own product line. Well, then in that case, I would say do it all together, because you're going to save on legal fees at that juncture if you do it all together. But if you tell me I'm going to do a product line 5 or 6 years down the road, I'm going to say, well, then hold off, because you can only do a certain amount of extensions anyway. So basically, once they say, hey, this name's good to go, they're going to want to see that product line. And they're only going to give you a certain amount of 6-month extensions. And so you have to, and you also have to pay every time you want to extend, because that's how it works at the United States Patent and Trademark Office. So every time you want to extend, you have to pay $125. And so that can keep going and going. But if it's not in the near future, I would say hold off. But if you know in the next 18 to 24 months from starting your business, you want to white label or you want to have your own products, then I would say do it all at one time.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So there's the USPTO.gov site. Do you recommend before someone goes to an attorney to find a name, that they do a cursory search on their own to see whether or not a name is available. Obviously, you could go on Google, you could Google a name, you can look on Instagram, you can type in a name on the URL to see if anybody's using it. And certainly if anybody's using it in that category or in that class, and then do like a search. And then if everything looks good, then to maybe hire an attorney to do a more in-depth search. Would that be your recommendation?
That is. So I do often tell people to go and use the USPTO.gov. It is a tool that you can use and start doing some searches. There are some caveats in that you kind of have to search it multiple ways. So I'll give you an example. I do this one a lot. If you put in clear skin, and at one point in time, people were taking out vowels. So if you typed in CLR space SKN, you're probably going to get no hits at all. Like it's going to show no available hits. And so you might think, hey, great, I've got a name that's like that I can get, right? But it is still going to be too similar to other names that are already registered, most likely. So you have to then go in and spell it common spelling, CLEARSKIN. And then you might get, different hits. And then take out some letters, do CLERSKIN. When you do it that way, lots of hits come up. And so I use that as an example to say, like, you're not necessarily always in the clear just because you have a name that's spelled uniquely, because clearly by taking out those vowels, I can still look at it and say, oh, it's clear skin. So then you need to also search it the way that it sounds, the way that other people are going to perceive it, and make sure that it's really good to go. And then even then, it might not be good to go, but at least you have a better basis of kind of understanding the availability of that name.
Totally. So I think that's really great advice. I know that it can be a little bit tricky because I've gotten myself into situations where I've done searches. I couldn't find anything on the internet. I went to the USPTO site. I did searches on there and I thought, okay, we're all really good to go. I feel pretty confident that my attorney doesn't have to do an in-depth search. I don't want to spend the money on it. I'm good. So we go ahead against their better judgment and against their best advice. We file the trademark and boom, someone comes back and says you can't use this name. It's confusingly similar, or you go through and then it doesn't pass through and it's confusingly similar, but it's nothing like that. The examiners just won't let it go through so many times. And then it ends up costing more money.
It does. And, you mentioned something that happens all the time. I try to explain to clients that just because the names are slightly different doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get it through.
Right.
And so I'll give you an example. Sometimes people will come to me and they'll say, hey, I found this other salon that does Brazilian waxing, and they call themselves Pretty Kitty. But my salon's name is The Pretty Kitty Wax and Studio. So it's different, right? Like, we'll be able to get it through. And I'm like, no. And they're like, but why? I have The Wax and Studio, and they just have Pretty Kitty. And I like to remind people, what is the memorable part of your trademark? Because everything else is just kind of extra. I call them throwaway words.
Yeah.
And so what's the memorable part of that trademark? It would be Pretty Kitty, right? And so I'm like, yes, but they're the same as far as the USPTO is concerned. So that's one example of a nuance. Another example is, let's say it is the Pretty Kitty, and it's a Brazilian wax studio, and there's already a Pretty Kitty for animal grooming, place. And they're like, hey, they groom animals, and we don't. We groom people, or you know what I mean? And we do waxes on people. And I'm like, yes, but it's still in the service industry. And so they are still similar names. Now, granted, in that situation, we may be able to make some arguments like, well, somebody who goes into a dog grooming or, an animal grooming facility is not going to expect that they're going to be also getting a Brazilian wax, right? And we can make those arguments. But like you said, it becomes more expensive because now we have to respond to those examiners who have said, hey, you guys are both service-based. You guys both have the name Pretty Kitty. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to deny it.
Yep, totally. There are thousands of homeless dogs in the pounds and shelters and running all over the streets, and not enough people out there to help them. Sprays for Strays is a fundraising organization that raises money through the sunless tanning and beauty industry to help all the rescues all over the United States of America pull the dogs out of the pounds and shelters, get them vetted, get their vaccinations, get them spayed and neutered, help with any sort of behavioral issues, and help to get them into their forever homes. Go to spraysforstrays.com and become a member or donate. Every little bit of support helps. Thank you to our sponsor, Sprays for Strays, for helping to save the lives of dogs, one spray tan at a time. Well, this is all really useful information, and I can't wait to check out your templates. Do you have anything specific for spray tan artists yet?
I don't have anything specific for spray tan artists, but it sounds like it's something I need to add to the arsenal. One thing I do have that is, no matter what industry you're in, is going to be those client service contracts. And the good thing about my templates is they're completely editable. So most of the ones are going to have standard stuff that you want: late cancellation, no-show policies, chargebacks, refunds, expectations, things like that. And then allergies. So like, even though it's not specific to spray tan artists, they're going to be able to go in and put known allergies or known products that are used or adverse reactions that you can expect. And all of those areas are already there for you to plug and play what makes sense for your business. And so we do have those. What I will need to do, and it'll be on my list, is getting consent forms for spray tan. Because that will be something that will be slightly different than some of the other ones.
Yeah, I have a client waiver that my attorney did that I make available to all of our spray tan artists. But I always think it's a good idea just to check it, update, see if there are any new laws or anything like that you might need to incorporate, because now we're not a new industry. When I started back in 2000, actually before 2005, nobody knew anything about spray tanning, and now it's an industry unto itself, and we have a lot more knowledge and information. So I'm sure there are a lot of things that would be included in a client waiver now that wouldn't have been in the beginning, because we know a lot more now.
Well, and that's a really good point. You mentioned updating them, making sure there are no, new changes in the laws. It is so important to have your client sign a new consent form. I like to say once a year. Okay. In my contracts or my consent forms, there's usually a line that basically says this consent form is good for today's service and any service hereafter for the period of a year. Sometimes you can have clients that you've had for 5 years, right? But like you said, the laws change. They probably need to sign an updated one, but also people forget, right? So if there ever becomes a situation where for some reason you're in court and the judge is like, well, did she know this was an adverse reaction? Did she know this was a possible, outcome? You want to be able to say, yes, she signed a consent form. And you don't want the judge to say, well, when did she sign it? And you'll be like, oh, she signed it in 2020. Well, it's 2025 almost, right? So I can't remember sometimes what I had for breakfast 2 weeks ago. So it's kind of hard to remember some of those nuanced things in your consent form. So by having them sign once a year, you at least can say, well, earlier this year, judge, she signed this consent form. She knew this was a possibility. And so it's good to have that.
Absolutely. Yes. Well, at the end of my podcast, I always ask my guests to give my listeners 3 things that they can start doing right now as action items to move closer to whatever it is that their goal is. So let's say that we have a new spray tan artist just starting out, because a lot of my customers are spray tan artists, and they're just starting up. They're just getting ready to choose their name, and they're considering within the next couple of years launching their own product line. What would be the 3 things? And I know we already touched on this, but let's have 3 really good actionable items that aren't very expensive that they could do today.
I would say, number 1, before you start anything, take a look at the uspto.gov that we talked about a little bit earlier. Run the name, do a slight search, see what you have. Get on Google, get on Instagram. Do not pick a name that is already basically flooded on Instagram. And I know we talked about spray tan, but I'll give you an example. Everybody has lashes by Rihanna, lashes by, whoever. Like, let's stay away from those. Let's try to find names that are different, not Pretty Kitty and the Pretty Kitty Salon and Wax Studio. So I would say try to find a really unique name. And once you think you found one, search uspto.gov and do those searches to be sure. Then I would say number 2 would be, and this is an easy actionable item, start separating your business money and your personal money from the start. Go into Bank of America or Wells Fargo or whoever you bank with and set up a separate business bank account. Now, that's going to bring me to my third one, which is get some type of business entity in place. If you are going to be a sole proprietor, that's one thing. But if you're going to be an LLC, then before you can even do what my number 2 was, you have to have that LLC in place, because when you go into the bank, you're going to have to use the LLC name, the LLC's EIN number, which is, for those of you listening, if you don't know what an EIN is, it's going to be your employment identification number. It's like your business's social security number. And so that's going to be on all those bank accounts. So you want to do those 3 things. That way you have some legal protection for your business. That's with the LLC or other similar entity. You have your bank account set up from the start. So your accountant will be very happy when it comes time for tax season. And then you have done a trademark search. So at the very least, it's not being used by 20 people already, right? So I would say those are some 3 good, actionable, relatively inexpensive items that you can check off early on.
Love it. Name, entity, and bank account.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me today on Glow Up Boss. It's been such a pleasure speaking with you. And I look forward to hopefully having you back on the show to talk about some more really important legal areas for our customers.
So much stuff we could talk about. I also have lots of free resources and, free things on the internet. So if you are on Instagram, that is going to be She Trademarks. And if you are looking for any of those templates that we said or we talked about, you can also find those on shetrademarks.com. But follow me for tips, tricks, and legal advice-ish on She Trademarks on Instagram.
That's wonderful. Well, I can't wait to download them myself and look at them myself. I know it's going to be an incredible resource for our community. So thank you so much. And I wish you a beautiful day.
Thanks for having me.